The operating room at St. Gabriel Medical Center felt smaller at 3 in the morning. Bright surgical lights flooded the open chest on the table. Everything else sat in a halo of shadow. The monitors at the head of the bed chimed in a quick, nervous rhythm. Beep, 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 too fast, too thin. Ooh? Pressure is dropping again, the anesthesiologist muttered. His voice was hoarse from too many hours awake. Dr. Michael Hart did not answer right away. His eyes followed the thin stream of blood along the suction line, tracing it to the metal canister. The color had deepened from bright red to a darker, sluggish shade. He could feel the sweat soaking the back of his scrub shirt. Tighten the retractor, he said. His voice was calmer than he felt. I need more exposure. His gloved hands hovered over the heart. They moved with a practiced certainty that had once made him a legend in this building. 12 hours earlier, when the first incision split the young man's chest, the staff had relaxed a little just seeing him scrub in. If anyone could pull off a miracle, it was Hart. Now the miracle was slipping away in tiny measured drops. The patient on the table was Jacob Miller, 32, a warehouse supervisor with a torn aortic root and a wife in the waiting room. He had a habit of calling everyone Buddy. He had joked nervously when they first wheeled him in. His voice had cracked when he whispered, "My kid is 5. Please, Doc." Michael adjusted his stance. His feet ached inside his clogs. His shoulders burned. He ignored it. He leaned in closer, eyes narrowing behind fogged lenses. "Clamp," he said. A scrub nurse placed the tool in his hand without looking. Her eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. Nearly 12 hours since the first incision. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. No one complained. The room smelled of antiseptic plastic and something metallic that settled on the back of the tongue. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm stuttered, skipped. "V-tac," the anesthesiologist said hastily. "He's flipping." "Bolus, Michael replied. "Now, and start compressions if we lose it." The team moved by reflex. They had done this together so many times that everyone knew their place. But the air felt different this time. Heavy, as if even the scrub drapes had learned to expect the worst. Outside the OR in the hallway, a small boy in a superhero t-shirt curled on a plastic chair. His sneakers did not touch the floor. He clutched a stuffed dinosaur so tight the seams strained. Every time someone in scrubs walked past, he lifted his head. "Is my dad okay?" he asked a nurse, his voice thin, almost polite. "We are doing everything we can, sweetie," she answered. She did not quite meet his eyes. The boy nodded, as if that meant something clear. He slid off the chair and patted on socked feet toward the window of the OR. He was too short to see inside. He pressed his cheek against the cold glass anyway, as if he could feel something through it. Inside, Michael placed the clamp with exquisite care. His fingers were steady for the moment. His breathing was not. "He is bleeding out faster than we can give it back to him," the perfusionist said quietly. There was no accusation in his tone, only numbers. "We cannot keep this up much longer." 5 more minutes, Michael said. The anesthesiologist looked at him. "You have been saying 5 more minutes for the last hour." Michael ignored him. He focused on the tissue beneath his hands, the torn vessel, the fragile edge of hope that clung to the beating muscle. Beep, beep, beep. For a second, the sound held. Then it flattened. The monitor released a single continuous tone that burned itself into every ear in the room. The line on the screen stretched into a straight green stripe. The air did not move. "Loss of pulse," someone said, though there was no need. "Start compressions," Michael ordered. A resident stepped up and began pressing on the open chest. Each compression sent a dull, wet sound into the room. The smell of blood thickened. Michael injected medication, called for another dose, shocked the heart. Once, twice, 3 times. "Come on," he whispered. No one answered. The only response was the long, unwavering tone of the monitor. After what felt like an hour, the anesthesiologist spoke. "Michael." He knew what the man wanted him to say. The time. The words that would turn a living person into a pronouncement. His hands were still inside the chest. They had finally started to tremble. He withdrew them slowly. "Stop compressions." The resident stepped back, breathing hard. The silence that followed was louder than the flatline. "Time of death," Michael said. His voice almost failed. He cleared his throat. 3:42 a.m. The tone on the monitor cut off with a click. Suddenly the room was filled with softer sounds. The rustle of gowns. The hiss of oxygen. A nurse sniffled once, then wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. Michael stared at Jacob Miller's open chest for a long second. The meat of the heart lay still. It no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the paperwork now. He stripped off his gloves. Under the fluorescent light, his bare hands looked older than he remembered. The skin around his knuckles was cracked from weeks of constant washing. His fingers shook as he reached for the sink. The water ran hot over his skin. It did not wash away the feeling. When he left the OR, the hallway felt too bright. A nurse hovered near the family room door, eyes red. The boy with the stuffed dinosaur was still by the window. He turned as soon as Michael stepped out. "Doctor." Michael stopped. The boy's eyes were enormous blue and raw from crying. A smear of chocolate ringed his mouth from some forgotten snack. "Did you fix him?" the boy asked. "You said you were really good." There was no rule in any protocol about how to answer a 5-year-old who asked that question. Michael swallowed. His throat hurt. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. The boy took a step closer. The dinosaur dangled from his fist. "Please," he whispered, "please don't let my dad die." The echo of those words bounced between Michael's ribs. "I'm sorry," he said at last. His voice barely carried. "We did everything we could." The boy stared at him as if trying to understand a foreign language. Slowly his face changed. His shoulders slumped. The dinosaur slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a soft, hollow sound. He did not scream. He did not throw himself around. He simply leaned back against the wall and slid down until he was sitting on the tile's legs, bent hands limp in his lap. A nurse moved toward him, but he pushed her away with a small mechanical gesture. Michael walked past them. Each step felt like wading through concrete. 3 days later, he sat in a conference room with no windows. The air conditioning hummed. A plastic pot plant sagged in the corner. The table was long and glossy, its surface reflecting 3 paper cups of stale coffee. Richard Klein, chief of staff, sat at the head of the table. To his right, a risk management attorney clicked a pen. To his left, a representative from the medical board stared at a stack of charts. "Dr. Hartby," Klein began, "the Miller case has attracted attention." Michael folded his hands in his lap. He kept them low so no one would see that they were not completely steady. "The surgery lasted nearly 12 hours, the attorney said. "There were several moments when other surgeons in your department noted concern in the record." "Concern about what?" Michael asked. "About your choice to proceed with aggressive repair, rather than call it earlier," the medical board representative replied. Her tone was flat. "Given the condition of the aorta and the length of bypass time, some might call it optimistic." "Jacob was 32, Michael said. "He had a kid. He walked into this hospital." "Exactly," the attorney cut in. "Which is why the family's lawyer is going to frame this as reckless. A doctor who could not accept limits. A cowboy." Klein lifted a hand. "No one is accusing you of bad intent, Michael, but intent is not what juries see. They see outcomes. They see a boy on the evening news." Silence spread across the table. The hum of the air conditioner grew louder in Michael's ears. "What are you saying?" he asked. "The board will restrict your license pending review," the woman said. "St. Gabriel will suspend your surgical privileges. It is the only way to protect the institution." Protect the institution. The phrase hung in the air like a chemical smell. Michael looked down at his hands. They lay motionless on his knees now, but he could still feel the phantom tremor from the OR. He thought of Jacob's chest of the boy and the hallway of the dinosaur on the floor. "Sign here," the attorney said, sliding a document toward him. "It confirms that you understand the terms." The pen felt heavy between his fingers. His signature came out jagged. It hardly looked like his name. That night, long after the corridors had emptied, Michael stood alone in the locker room outside the OR. The overhead lights flickered in one corner. His locker door was open. Inside hung his white coat and a photograph of him with a group of residents all smiling in fresh scrubs. He unpinned his ID badge from his coat. The small rectangle of plastic bore his name and title in neat black letters. Michael Hart, MD Cardiothoracic Surgery. For a moment he held it in his palm. The clip dug into his skin. His hand started to shake again. He closed his fingers around the badge until his knuckles whitened. Then he opened his hand and laid the badge gently on the bench. At the end of the hallway, the staff exit waited. A metal door with a push bar and a small window. Beyond it, the January night pressed close a smear of dark sky and streetlights. Michael walked toward it, the soles of his shoes squeaking faintly on the polished floor. He did not look back at the OR doors. He pushed the bar. The door swung open. Cold air rushed in sharp against his face. He stepped out into the winter and let the door close behind him. 2 years later, winter still clung to Chicago, but in a different way. On Harbor Street, the wind did not knife between glass towers. It crawled along low brick buildings and rattled loose metal signs. At the corner of Harbor and Fifth, there was a squat, faded structure with peeling paint and a hand-painted board over the door. Harbor Street. Free clinic, walk-in care, no insurance needed. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant, instant coffee, and wet wool. A humming space heater struggled against the cold seeping through old window frames. In the cramped waiting room, plastic chairs formed 2 crooked rows. Every seat was taken. An elderly man in a mechanic's jacket coughed into a crumpled tissue. A young woman with a sleeping toddler on her lap rubbed her temples. A man in a delivery uniform flexed his swollen fingers. Some people stared at their phones. Most did not have one. Behind a narrow reception counter, a volunteer named Mia tried to keep order with a clipboard and a smile that was starting to slip. "Mr. Collins, you are next," she called. The door to the single exam room opened. Dr. Michael Hart stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame. He no longer wore a white coat. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms. The blue of his shirt had faded from many washes, and a faint ring of old coffee marked one cuff. A few strands of gray threaded his dark hair at the temples. His eyes were tired but clear. "Al," he said, "come on back." The mechanic pushed himself up from the chair, one hand pressed against his ribs. As he passed, he clasped Michael's shoulder briefly, a reflex more than a greeting. Inside the exam room, the walls were close. A second-hand exam table took up one side. A metal cabinet held supplies, most of them donated. A cheap digital blood pressure cuff lay coiled like a small snake on the counter. Someone had taped a child's drawing near the light switch, all crooked lines and bright colors. Michael waited for the click of the door closing before he spoke. "Tell me about the cough," he said. Al Collins lowered himself onto the exam table with a wince. The vinyl squeaked. "It is nothing," he said. "Just age, been at the shop too long, 40 years of engines, you know." The cough, when it came, was not the bark of a smoker. It was deep wet with a rattle at the end that lingered in the air. Michael listened to the sound, then to the silence that followed. "How long has it been like that?" he asked. "A few months, I guess. Every day. Most days." Michael wrapped the blood pressure cuff around Al's arm and pressed the button. As the cuff inflated, he watched the man's face more than the numbers. "You still at the same garage on 27th?" he asked. "Yeah, same place. They put in some new paint bays last year, new sprays. Smells like cheap nail polish and gasoline had a baby." Michael made a small note on the chart. His handwriting was thin, precise. "You wearing a mask?" he asked. Al shrugged. "They got those paper ones. I forget half the time. Hard to breathe in them." Michael nodded slowly. He lifted his stethoscope, warmed the diaphragm in his palm, then pressed it to Al's back. "Deep breath," he said, "in and out." The lungs did not sound right. There was a crackle at the bases, a faint wheeze on exhalation. Not dramatic, not yet. He stepped back, looped the stethoscope around his neck, and leaned against the counter. "You did not come in here because of age, Fan Du," Ying said. "You came in because something scared you." Al hesitated. He looked down at his hands, the nails dark with oil that no soap could remove. "Last week I coughed and there was a little blood," he said finally, barely above a whisper. "Not a lot. Just a streak. Thought maybe it was nothing. Then it happened again. I did not tell my wife. She worries." Michael did not rush to fill the silence. He let it sit until the older man looked up. "It might be irritation," Michael said. "From chemicals, from chronic exposure, it might be something else. Either way, it is not nothing." "I cannot stop working," Al said. "We got a mortgage, grandkids." "I'm not telling you to stop," Michael replied. His voice stayed quite steady. "I'm telling you that your body is trying to get your attention. I think it is time we listen." He wrote out an order for a chest x-ray on a slip of paper, then frowned at it. Harbor Street had no imaging of its own. He would have to call a friend at a small imaging center, negotiate a lower fee, maybe pay part of it from the clinic's donation box. He folded the slip and handed it to Al. "Take this to Lakeside Diagnostics on Western," he said. "I will call ahead. They will take care of you." Al held the paper like it might vanish. His shoulders seemed to lift a little. "You think it is bad?" "I think we do not guess," Michael said. "We find out." He helped the man off the table. As they moved toward the door, Al's cough broke loose again. The rattle in it lingered in Michael's ears after the door opened and the noise of the waiting room flowed in. "Thank you, Doc," Al said. Michael clapped a hand on his shoulder, feeling the thinness beneath the jacket. "We will talk after the x-ray," he said. In the waiting room, Mia was already calling the next name. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "you are up." A woman in her 40s stood at once wary and relieved. Pain showed in the tight line around her mouth. A boy of about 10 rose with her hovering at her elbow. "We can both go," he asked. "Oh," Himmel asked. "Sure," Michael said. "Come on." The day rolled forward like that. Patient after patient. Complaints that sounded simple at first then opened into something larger when given room. Back pain that turned out to be kidney stones. Headaches that were not migraines but uncontrolled blood pressure. A teenager with constant stomach aches who finally admitted he sometimes went 2 days without eating. By noon, the heater was humming at full strength. Condensation fogged the lower panes of the waiting room windows. The smell of wet coats and cheap coffee filled the small space. At one point, when Mia stepped outside to take a phone call, the bell on the clinic door jingled, and Carla Martinez walked in, shaking snow from her dark curls. She wore jeans, a thick sweater, and the same direct expression she had in the OR years ago. The hospital badge that used to hang from her pocket was gone. She carried a tote bag, stuffed with charts and a box of latex gloves. You started without me, she said. Michael glanced up from a chart and felt the corner of his mouth lift. You were not on the schedule, he said. I had a half day, she replied. Figured you could use an extra pair of hands. Her gaze slid over the crowded room. Something like pride and sorrow flickered across her face. Looks like I was right, she added. She slipped behind the counter, kissed Mia on the cheek, then washed her hands at the tiny sink scrubbing as if she were back at St. Gabriel. I brought some sample meds, she said, and gauze, and miracle of miracles, a functioning pulse oximeter. We should frame it, Michael said. She snorted. Do not tempt me. With Carla there, the work moved a little faster. She triaged patients, wrapped ankles, checked blood sugars, scolded an old man for hiding his insulin. She peeked into the exam room when Michael lingered too long. You eating today? She asked at one point. I had coffee, he said without looking up from a chart. That is not food. He did not argue. Later, when she left a sandwich on the counter by his elbow, he ate it without comment between patients. In the brief gaps between door clicks and questions, sounds threaded through the building. A baby fussed, then quieted. Someone laughed at a joke. Snowplows groaned as they crawled down the street outside. In the back, the old refrigerator buzzed, keeping donated vaccines just cold enough. Michael listened to all of it without quite meaning to. He had learned in the last 2 years that rooms spoke even when no one did. The way chairs scraped, the way a person cleared their throat, the way someone took too long to answer a simple question. It all said something. Near the end of the afternoon, the crowd thinned. The light through the front windows turned a dull gray. Mia sorted files into a crate. Carla refilled a box of tongue depressors. Michael washed his hands at the sink. The water ran lukewarm, then cold. His fingers were red from the repeated washing. For a moment, as he flexed them under the stream, he caught the edge of a familiar tremor. He shut off the faucet and held his hand still over the basin. The tremor faded. Bad? Carla asked from the doorway. He shook his head once. It is fine. She watched him a second longer, then nodded and moved away. On the counter, near the sink, sat a battered wallet. When he picked it up to slip into his pocket, a laminated rectangle peeked from one of the inner slots. The ink on the badge had begun to blur with age, but the name was still visible. Michael Hart, MD Cardiothoracic Surgery, St. Gabriel Medical Center. He looked at it for a beat, then pushed it back into the wallet and closed it. Mia flipped the sign on the clinic door from open to closed. Out on Harbor Street, traffic crawled through slush. A siren wailed faintly somewhere deeper in the city, the sound rising and falling, then fading into the evening noise. Michael turned off the lights in the exam room. In the dimness, the child's drawing by the switch caught the last of the daylight. It showed a stick-figure doctor with long arms, a row of smiling patients, and a big off-center sun. He stood there a moment longer, listening to the building settle, the heater click off the quiet that followed. Then he took his coat from the hook, pulled it on, and walked to the front door. The metal handle was cold under his hand. He unlocked it and stepped out into the street, pulling the door closed behind him until the latch clicked softly in the gathering dark. The wind had picked up by the time Michael reached his car. The sky over Harbor Street sagged low and gray-heavy with old snow. A thin crust of ice clung to the windshield. He scraped it away with the edge of a plastic card, his breath making brief clouds in the air. When he climbed into the driver's seat, the upholstery was cold enough to sting through his coat. He started the engine. The heater coughed once before it began to blow air that was only slightly warmer than the street outside. The dashboard clock read 6:47 p.m. He sat there for a moment with his hands on the steering wheel, watching his reflection in the dark glass of the clinic door. The painted letters of Harbor Street Free Clinic floated over his shadowed face. In the distance toward downtown, a siren wound up thin at first, then sharper. Chicago traffic absorbed the sound, folding it into its constant murmur. He pulled away from the curb. Harbor Street gave way to wider roads. The low brick buildings thinned, replaced by taller apartments, and then farther on, by glass and steel towers that caught the last of the dull light. Snowbanks pressed in against the edges of the lanes, gray from exhaust. Tires hissed through slush. Red brake lights glowed in uneven lines. He drove on muscle memory, his mind still half back in the clinic. He thought of Al Collins and the slip of paper for the x-ray. He thought of the teenager with the empty stomach, the woman with the tight jaw who had not wanted to admit she was afraid of losing her job if she missed another shift. His fingers curled and uncurled against the wheel. The overhead highway signs flashed green and white. He passed an exit he used to take every day without thinking, the one for St. Gabriel Medical Center. His shoulders tensed automatically as the sign loomed and dropped away behind him. The siren he had heard earlier grew louder, then multiplied. More joined it, weaving into a high wail that cut through the noise of the city. In the rearview mirror, he saw the flicker of emergency lights bouncing off wet asphalt. He moved his car into the right lane to let them pass. 2 ambulances shot by engines straining red and blue lights washing the inside of his car. For a heartbeat, he was back in a different night, following a gurney down a hallway under those same colors. He watched the ambulances take the upcoming ramp. They were headed toward St. Gabriel. Ahead, clouds banked low over the skyline. The tall shape of the hospital rose against them while the rest of the city flickered in yellow and white. The windows of St. Gabriel, usually lit like 100 small steady stars, were dark in patterns that did not make sense. Only the emergency lights over the entrances pulsed red on red. Michael slowed. At the next intersection, the traffic lights blinked yellow in all directions. The line of cars thickened. Some drivers craned their necks to see what was happening. Across 2 lanes, the emergency entrance to St. Gabriel glowed like a wound, bright and frantic. He could see figures moving near the doors, silhouettes against snow and glass. A generator somewhere rumbled low, a sound out of sync with the usual electric hum. His hands tightened on the wheel. He could have turned right, merged with the traffic headed west, left the hospital to disappear in the side mirror. Harbor Street was behind him, his small world of one exam room and short steps between door and chair and sink. The herd of vehicles around him inched forward. Another ambulance came from the opposite direction, sirens screaming, and cut through traffic to dive into the bay. The drivers it passed stared after it with that peculiar mixture of curiosity and relief reserved for other people's emergencies. When the light changed again, Michael flicked his turn signal and eased his car into the lane toward the hospital. The closer he came, the stranger the building looked. A section of windows on the west tower still glowed, but the rest were black. Emergency floodlights lit patches of pavement in the underside of the awning over the ER doors. The red sign that read emergency flickered at one corner. As he pulled into the outer lot, a security guard in a heavy coat was waving cars away, trying to keep the lanes clear. Michael rolled his window down. "You cannot park here," the guard called. His breath puffed in the cold. "We are at capacity." "I'm not visiting," Michael said. The words tasted odd. "I used to work here." The guard squinted at him, then at the line of incoming ambulances. A shrill voice from his radio crackled something about code black and generator failure. "Power is out in half the building," the guard said. "They are diverting in 10 minutes, but right now—" He shook his head. Behind him, a stretcher burst through the sliding doors, pushed by 2 paramedics. A nurse jogged alongside, trying to adjust the oxygen mask on the patient's face. The automatic doors opened and closed, letting out waves of noise, then cutting them off. Michael put the car in park. "I am going in," he said. Yes, Camille said. He did not wait for agreement. He stepped out into the snow, locked the car with a quick beep, and walked toward the emergency entrance. The sliding doors parted at the motion sensor. Inside, the air hit him like a wall, hot and overcrowded. The smell of antiseptic and sweat and fear rose up in a layered wave. The overhead lights were dimmer than usual. Only some banks were working. Others flickered, feeding on uneven power. Every cubicle seemed full. Patients in hallway beds spilled into any available space. IV poles clustered like a thin forest. Monitors beeped and chirped in erratic patterns. Somewhere a child was crying. Someone else was shouting in Spanish. Radio chatter hissed from the nursing station. For a second, the chaos blurred. His eyes tried to pull old shapes from the noise. "Michael." The voice cut through from his right. He turned. Carla stood near a supply cart, a blood pressure cuff in one hand. Her hair was pulled back in a low knot, flyaways sticking to her forehead with sweat. A smear of something dark streaked her sleeve. Under the harsh lights, her face looked sharper. "You picked a night," she said. "What happened?" he asked. "Storm earlier knocked something out on the grid," she replied. The main generator kicked in, then overloaded. Half of this side was running on backup. Then that backup started to fail too. She glanced toward a corner of the department where a tangle of cables snaked toward a humming metal box. "We are keeping monitors and vents on rationed power," she said. "Everything else we are improvising." A nurse hurried past, bumping Carla's shoulder, muttering an apology. Somewhere deeper in the department, a man groaned. Michael scanned the room. In the central trauma bay, curtains were half closed around a flurry of movement. He could see feet in bloody shoe covers. A voice rose above the others. "No or no vent, no go," the voice. "Oh, that voice insisted." "Who is in charge?" Michael asked. Carla's jaw tightened. "Connor Lee," she said. "He is attending tonight." He found Dr. Lee near the central bay, standing with a chart in one hand and a laminated protocol sheet in the other. His hair was flattened on one side, as if he had been running his hands through it for hours. The collar of his scrubs was crooked. His eyes were fixed on the paper. "We cannot proceed without full monitoring and surgical support," Connor said. His tone was clipped, almost formal. "Read the policy. Blackout protocol requires stable backup power for any major intervention. "We are losing her now," a nurse said. "Listen to her, Sats." Michael stepped closer, staying just outside the open curtain. On the gurney in the center of the trauma bay lay a woman in her 30s. Dried blood streaked her hairline and neck. Her chest rose in shallow, uneven jerks. Her shirt had been cut open, revealing bruising already blooming across her ribs. A cervical collar locked her head in place. Her skin had that gray tinge he knew too well, the color of someone who did not have many breaths left. At the head of the bed, a respiratory therapist tried to keep an airway in place with one hand while adjusting a portable monitor with the other. The monitor flickered. The numbers blinked out and back as the battery struggled. Beside the gurney, clutching the rail so tightly her fingers were white, stood a girl. She wore a yellow dress spattered with dried blood and road grit. Her dark hair was tangled, a cheap barrette hanging at the end of one strand. Her shoes were mismatched, one sneaker, one sock. Her cheeks were streaked not from the blood, but from the tracks of tears that had dried and started again. "Mom," she whispered. "Mom, wake up." Her voice cut through the overlapping sounds around them, thin but piercing. She leaned closer to the woman on the table, her small shoulders shaking. "Please," she said. "Please, somebody help her." A nurse tried to lead her away. The girl twisted out of reach and moved back to the gurney, pressing her cheek against her mother's hand. Her lips trembled. "She is all I have," she said a little louder this time. "Please do not let her die." Connor shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He did not look at the girl. His eyes stayed on the protocol sheet. "We have no operating room," he said. He said. "No sterile field, no reliable suction. We try to open her chest in here in a blackout, and she codes on the table it is malpractice waiting to happen. We stabilize, we wait for power, then we transfer if needed." "She will not make it to the light," the nurse said. Michael took a step forward. Carla saw it from where she stood and went very still. The noise of the ER swelled and receded around him. Monitor chimes, a distant overhead page, the low rumble of the faltering generator, voices layered on voices. Then the girl spoke again, and everything else seemed to fall back for a heartbeat. "Please," she whispered, looking around the room, eyes wild and searching. "Somebody please hear me." Her words vibrated in the air, almost the same pitch as a memory buried in his chest. A boy in a superhero shirt. A dinosaur hitting the floor. The taste of defeat in metal and fluorescent light. Michael's breath shortened. His heart thudded once hard against his ribs. He stood at the edge of the open curtain, watching the girl's fingers curl around her mother's limp hand, listening to the thin quiver in her voice, hearing the way no one quite answered her. Michael stepped fully into the trauma bay. The nurse at the foot of the gurney half-turned surprise flickering across her face when she recognized him. Connor noticed the movement and looked up. For a moment, recognition and something sharper crossed the younger man's features. Then his expression shut down into practiced annoyance. "This area is restricted," Connor said. "Family only or staff." "I am staff enough," Michael replied. He moved to the opposite side of the bed, opposite the girl. Up close, he could see the pattern of bruising across the woman's chest, the shallow tug of each breath, the way her pulse fluttered weakly at the base of her throat. "What do we have here?" he asked. "High-speed collision," the nurse answered before Connor could object. "Hit and run, no seatbelt, possible chest wall crush, decreased breath sounds on the left, hypotensive, tachycardic, declining S8s. We suspect internal bleeding. Could be tamponade, could be pulmonary contusion, could be both." "Name?" Michael asked. "Dana Brooks," the nurse said. He nodded once. "Dana." Her eyelids fluttered, then stilled again. Her lips moved without sound. "Sir, you are not on the chart," Connor said. "You do not have privileges here." Michael did not take his eyes off the monitor. The waveform for her oxygen saturation jumped, then dropped again like a signal trying to break through static. "What is your plan?" Michael asked. "We stabilize," Connor said. He held up the laminated sheet as if it were a shield. "Fluids blood if we can get it, analgesia monitor her until power is fully restored. We are not opening anyone's chest in a blackout." "Her blood pressure," Michael said. 70/40 and falling," the anesthesiologist called out. "Heart rate. 145 weak." The little girl looked from face to face, trying to read their tones. Her hand on her mother's wrist trembled. "Get her out of here," Connor told one of the nurses, tilting his head toward the girl. "She should not be in the trauma bay." "I am not leaving her," the girl said. Her voice shook but held. "I am not leaving my mom." Michael crouched slightly so his eyes were level with hers. "Emma," the nurse murmured, offering him the name. "Emma," Michael said. "My name is Michael. I need to talk to the doctors for a second. Your mom can still hear you. You stay right here and hold her hand all right. That is your job." Emma swallowed. Her gaze clung to his face. After a moment, she nodded just once and tightened her grip on Dana's hand. Michael straightened and stepped back from the bed, pulling Connor and Carla with him into a thin slice of space near the wall. She is crashing, he said quietly. Her chest trauma suggests tamponade. She will not last long enough to wait this out. Which is why we keep her here, Connor shot back. We do not have an operating room. All surgical theaters are dark. We have no central monitors, no reliable vents, no suction. We try to cut in there, we may as well be doing it in a parking lot. There is still OR2, Carla said. Both men turned to her. You still have that old manual backup? Michael asked. Carla nodded a quick jerk of her chin. Her voice dropped. They never got around to tearing it out. Manual pump auxiliary battery portable suction. We use it for absolute worst case if the main systems fail. Maintenance checks it every few months. Last log was 2 weeks ago. Output, Michael said. Enough for one room, maybe 20 minutes if we do not overload it, she answered. 20 minutes is not long enough to set up a full team, Connor said. Not safely. Michael's gaze flicked back to the gurney. The portable monitor blinked red for a second, then steadied again. Emma had laid her cheek against her mother's arm, eyes squeezed shut. 20 minutes might be exactly how long she has, Michael said. Connor pressed his lips together. His fingers dug into the protocol sheet. This is not your hospital anymore, Hisawa, he said. Klein made that clear. Your license is restricted. You are a guest here at best and a liability at worst. You cannot just walk in and take a trauma case to the OR. Michael met his eyes. Do you want to take her? He asked. What? Do you want this case? Michael said. His voice stayed level. You open her chest in OR2 under backup power with a manual pump, you will be the one they call reckless when anything goes wrong. Are you ready to sign your name under that? Color rose in Connor's neck. I'm not afraid of a difficult case. You are afraid of a lawsuit, Michael said. So is Klein. So is this whole building. Carla shifted her weight restlessly. We are burning time, she said. Emma's voice floated over from the bed again, thin and hoarse. Please, please help my mom. The sound wrapped itself around Michael's ribs. It vibrated in the same place that other child's plea lived, the one that had not been answered. His hand flexed once at his side. He turned fully to Carla. Or two, he said. Is the manual pump functional for sure? Maintenance checked it, she said. It passed, but they marked the battery at low performance. They wrote 20 minutes minimal functional window. Minimal, he repeated. She nodded. Her eyes shone with a nervous brightness. It is something, she said. Connor shook his head. This is insane. You cannot operate under those conditions. That room is not prepped. There are no staff assigned. We do not have anesthesia signed off. We do not have admin approval. If she dies up there, they will hang every one of us with you. If she dies down here while we watch the power come back on, I do not think the paperwork will feel any lighter, Michael said. He moved back to the foot of the gurney. His voice sharpened. Carla, can you get OR2 ready in 5 minutes? She hesitated for half a breath, then something in her posture settled. Yes, she said, I can. You are not serious, Connor said. Michael looked at him. 2 years ago, Michael said quietly, so the words would fall between them instead of over the room. I stayed in an OR with a man who had no real chance. I pushed because I was sure I could win a fight that was already lost. A kid asked me not to let his father die. I had to tell him I could not. Then I watched them use that to paint me as a monster. Connor's jaw clenched. You want sympathy. I want you to understand, Michael said. I know what it is to live with a decision like this. I know what it is to be wrong. I have already been crucified for it. I am still here. He glanced at Emma. If I walk away when I know that woman has a real shot for once, that is something I do not walk back from. Your license is not fully reinstated, Connor said. You have outpatient privileges only. Consult clinic work. Nothing like this. Then report me, Michael said. Call Klein, call the board, put a note in whatever system you like. I will still take her upstairs. Carla stepped closer to Connor. He is the best shot she has, she said. You know it, I know it. Half the staff knows it. We can sit here and quote protocols over her, or we can move. A respiratory therapist raised his head. Her sates are dropping again, he called. 78 and falling. Michael turned to the nurse at the head of the bed. Get a portable vent and a bag egg, he said. We are taking her to OR2. Grab blood if the bank can spare it. I will need a thoracotomy tray ready. The nurse hesitated only a second before nodding. Her shoulders straightened as if she had been waiting for someone to make a decision. You do not have authorization, Connor said. His voice rose, drawing glances from nearby staff. You are not on the call schedule. You do not have malpractice coverage through this institution. If you do this, you are on your own. Michael stripped off his coat to reveal the scrub top underneath. He had put it on that morning out of habit beneath his shirt, an old reflex he had never quite broken. Now it clung to his shoulders, the cotton thinning at the seams. "I have been on my own for a while," he said. He leaned over the bed so Emma could see his face. "We are going to take your mom to another room where I can work on her chest," he told her gently. "There will be more machines and more people. You might not be able to stay right next to her, but she is not going anywhere without us trying everything." Emma sniffed hard. "Are you going to fix her?" His throat tightened. He had promised that once and failed. The memory flashed through him like static. "I'm going to do everything I know how to do," he said. "And I know a lot." She studied him as if measuring the weight of those words. Then she nodded a tiny jerk of her chin and let go of her mother's wrist, only long enough to step back so the staff could move. "Carla," Michael called, "scrub in with me." "Already on it," she said. She grabbed a pair of gloves and gestured to an orderly to clear the hallway. They wheeled Dana out of the trauma bay. The gurney rattled over the threshold. Emma walked alongside, fingers brushing the sheet, eyes never leaving her mother's face. At the junction where the corridor split toward imaging and the elevators, a hospital administrator in a suit appeared, phone pressed to his ear. He saw the moving trauma bed and raised his free hand. "Where are you taking her?" he asked sharply. "Or two," Michael said without slowing. "There is no authorization for that," the man said. "You cannot just decide." Michael did not answer. The gurney glided past. Emma brushed against the administrator's leg and kept going. They reached the elevator bank. One door already stood open, held by a transport tech who had read the urgency in their faces. They loaded the gurney inside. Michael stepped in last. As the doors began to close, he caught Connor's gaze across the hall. The younger doctor stood with the protocol sheet limp in his hand, watching. "Dr. Lee," Michael called just before the gap narrowed. Connor blinked. "Remember something, so," Michael said. "The day you choose the patient over the policy, that is the day you actually become a doctor." The elevator doors slid shut on his words. The car rumbled upward. The fluorescent light inside buzzed faintly. Emma sniffled, wiping her nose on the back of her hand. Carla checked the portable monitor's battery, her jaw tight. When the doors opened, the air on the surgical floor felt colder. They pushed Dana down the hallway toward OR2. The door to the operating room waited at the end, its small window revealing darkness inside. Carla moved ahead to flip on whatever lights were still connected to the backup. A low bank along the ceiling flickered to life. Michael paused for a heartbeat in front of the door. The last time he had walked into an OR as lead surgeon, the night had ended with a flatline and a badge on a bench. His hand found the handle. He pushed the door open and stepped through. The air in OR2 had a stale, unused smell. The overhead lights were dimmer than in the main theaters. Only one row along the ceiling came on when Carla hit the switch. The rest flickered and died, leaving shadows pooled in the corners. In the center of the room stood an old operating table. Beside it, a bulky metal unit hummed to life as a surgical tech twisted a switch. A small panel on its side glowed weakly, a set of green bars shivering and settling at the middle of the scale. "Auxiliary power engaged," the tech said. "Battery reads at 40%. "Clock it," Michael replied. Morales checked his watch. "Starting 20-minute count," he said. "Now." They slid Dana from the gurney onto the narrow table. Her head lolled slightly in the collar. The portable monitor on the pole beside her beeped in an irregular pattern, the numbers drifting in and out as it adjusted to the change in position. "SAT 74, did the respiratory therapist called. Blood pressure 60/30, heart rate 150 and thready." Michael took it in, let the numbers sink under his skin. "Carla Scrub," he said. "Morales, you are with me. Sam, you have airway. Linda, you manage blood and meds." Gloved hands set up a sterile field with quick, efficient motions. The laparotomy tray clinked softly as instruments were arranged, blades and clamps catching the weak light. In the corner, a faded whiteboard still carried the ghost of a checklist from some long-ago procedure, barely visible beneath a thin film of dry erase residue. Michael went to the scrub sink. The water ran cold, then lukewarm, gurgling in a way that suggested the plumbing was as old as the backup unit. He pressed his foot on the pedal and watched the foam gather and slide over his fingers. For an instant, his hands trembled. He focused on the feeling of each finger, each knuckle, each joint. He rubbed methodically, palms, backs of hands, between fingers, around thumbs. The tremor eased, then stopped. He lifted his gaze. In the reflection of the small metal panel above the sink, he saw a pale slice of his face, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper than they had been 2 years ago. A thin strip of fluorescent light cut across his forehead. 5 minutes gone," Morales called from inside the room. Michael rinsed. Water splashed down his wrists, carrying soap into the drain. He stepped away, shook his hands once, and let the circulating nurse guide his arms into a sterile gown, then into gloves. The cotton of the gown rasped against his forearms. He walked to the table. The world narrowed until it was mostly the rectangle of Dana Brooks's chest. Her skin was cool and slightly sticky. Up close, the bruises spread in a more defined pattern, the purple and blue arcs of a steering wheel, the small dark dots, where capsullaries had burst. Her breath hitched shallowly under the mask. Her eyelids fluttered without opening. "Ms. Brooks," he said softly, more for himself than for anyone else. "We are going to help you." He nodded at the circulating nurse. "Prep," he said. They cleaned her chest in widening circles. The scent of antiseptic rose sharp and familiar. Drapes went up, blocking out everything but the field from collarbone to abdomen. The portable monitor beeped an uneven rhythm in the background. "Sat 69, Sam said at the head of the table. "She is losing ground." Morales spoke without looking away from the instruments. 12 minutes left on that battery, Shah, he said. Michael picked up the scalpel. The handle settled into his palm like something he had been missing. The blade gleamed thin and unforgiving. He placed the tip just below the sternum. "Incision," he said. He drew the line upward steady and smooth. Skin parted. A thin line of blood welled along the path, then widened as he deepened the cut. The room seemed to hold its breath with him. "Retractors," he said. Carla placed them. Metal met bone with a faint scraping sound. They opened the chest wall, exposing the sternum. He worked quickly, but each motion had weight. A faint whine rose from the backup unit in the corner, almost too low to notice a constant unhappy note. 10 minutes, Morales said. Michael did not look away from the field. "Sternal saw," he said. The saw buzzed to life. Its vibration traveled up his arms through the sterile drape. The smell of bone dust joined the antiseptic and blood, a dry, chalky odor that lodged in the back of the throat. He split the sternum, then handed the saw back without glancing up. Carla and Morales eased the halves apart. The chest cavity opened with a soft creak. Blood pooled where it should not. "Sponges," he said. They soaked and suctioned, clearing the view. The manual suction pump clattered as it worked the tech at its side, keeping a rhythm with the handle. In the dim light, the heart appeared shrouded by a thin, taut sac. The pericardium looked swollen tight as a drum. "Tamponade," Michael said more to himself than anyone else. He slid the scalpel tip into the pericardial sac, careful, precise. Dark blood jetted out under pressure, spilling into the field. It had the thick, syrupy look of old fluid compressed into a space too small. The pressure on the heart eased as the sac drained. For a few seconds, the monitor line fluttered higher, then dipped again. "Sat 64, Sam called. Pressure holding at 60/30, but barely." Michael inserted his fingers gently and lifted the heart just enough to see more of the damage. A contusion marred the muscle. A fragile vein along its surface oozed. "Get me a 4-0, he said, "and keep that suction steady." Morales placed the suture in his hand. The thread felt almost weightless between his fingers. He made the stitch small and exact, closing the leak with as little trauma as possible. 8 minutes? Morales set his voice a touch tighter. The whine of the backup unit climbed half a tone. "Start another unit of blood," Linda said. "We are behind." Michael worked in close, deliberate movements, each one shaving seconds off the battery's life. Sweat gathered under his cap. A droplet slid down his temple, caught on the edge of his mask. He could hear Sam bagging at the head of the table, a regular hiss and release, trying to push oxygen into battered lungs. "Heart rate is 120, Sam said, weak but present." Michael placed his fingertips on the myocardium, feeling the rhythm directly. It fluttered under his touch, irregular, but it was there. He glanced at the tiny screen on the side of the backup unit. One of the green bars had flickered and gone out. 6 minutes, Morales said. "Stay with me, Dana," Michael murmured. "We are not done yet." He checked the cavity again. Blood still oozed from the area around the right ventricle, slower now. He placed another fine stitch. "Sponges count?" he asked. 7 and 7 out, Carla replied. "We are clean." He nodded. "Let us place a temporary closure," Hikim said. "We will not fully close the sternum yet. We may need to get back in when there is stable power." The idea of having another chance hung in the air between the words. A tremor rippled through the lights. The overhead fixtures dimmed, then brightened again with a cough of current. The monitor flickered. "Battery at minimal," the tech said. 4, maybe 5 minutes. Michael set a sterile temporary closure device over the open chest, anchoring it at the edges so that the heart still had room to expand while being protected. It was not elegant, but it would buy time. He watched the monitor as he did it. Beep, beep, beep. The line steadied. The heart rate slowed from its frantic gallop to something closer to a purposeful pace. "Pressure 78/50, Linda said. "That is better." "Sat 72 and inching up," Sam said. "She is still critical, but she is responding." Michael allowed himself a single breath that went all the way down. 3 minutes, Morales said. "We need to get her off this backup soon." Michael looked at the heart one last time. It moved against the temporary closure, not strong yet, but no longer desperate. "Okay, Pshek," he said. "We are done for now. Let us secure what we can while we still have light." They taped lines, checked connections, tightened dressing edges. The backup unit's whine rose to a thin, strained pitch. Then with a soft click the overhead lights shifted. The dim yellowish glow brightened, filling in the corners of the room. The hum in the walls deepened as regular power flowed back into the circuit. The monitor screen refreshed numbers sharpening. Main power restored. The tech said relief plain. Backup disengaging. The unit's complaint faded into silence. For a second, no one moved. Beep, beep, beep. The sound felt different now, less fragile. It threaded through the room with a quiet insistence. Michael stepped back from the table. Sam, coordinate transfer to a proper ICU bed. Yeah, he said. Linda, let them know we have an unstable post-thoracotomy who needs a monitored room as soon as possible. Morales finished the note in case anyone wants to know what we did in the dark. You got it, Morales said. Carla was still standing across from him, her hands gloved, streaked with drying blood up to the wrists. Her eyes shone above her mask. You good? She asked. He looked at his hands. They were steady. For now, he said. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. He stripped off his gloves. They came away inside out a soft, wet pat as they hit the biohazard bin. His fingers underneath were pale and wrinkled from sweat and scrubbing. Tiny red marks traced where the elastic had bitten his skin. He peeled off his gown next. The ties at the back felt clumsy. Carla helped loosen them without comment. She is not out of the woods, Linda said, watching the monitor. But she has a shot. Michael nodded once. The words did not need answering. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped out into the corridor. The lights in the surgical wing had come back fully. Nurses moved more quickly now, hall phones ringing as systems came online again. The distant sound of an overhead announcement floated down the hall. He walked toward the elevator, the smell of antiseptic and metal trailing with him. As he turned the corner, he saw a small figure on a vinyl bench by the wall. Emma sat with her knees pulled up to her chest. The yellow dress rumpled her hair messier than before. Her hands were clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Dried tears streaked her cheeks, leaving pale lines on her skin. She looked up when she heard his steps. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then he crossed the distance between them and crouched so they were at eye level. Is she gone? Emma asked. Her voice was scraped raw from crying. No, Michael said. He felt the words settle into the air between them. Your mom is still with us, he said. Her heart is beating stronger now. She's very sick and she will need a lot of care. But right now she's here. Emma stared at him, searching his face for any sign of a lie. You fixed her, she whispered. I helped her heart make it through tonight, he said. A lot of people in that room did. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, her hands loosened in her lap. A sob hitched in her chest, then broke into a sound that was not quite a cry and not quite a laugh. Can I see her? She asked. Not yet, he said. They are getting her ready to go to a special room where they can watch her very carefully. As soon as they say you can go in, someone will come get you. She nodded slowly, her fingers worried at the hem of her dress twisting the fabric. Thank you, she said. He reached out and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. The cotton under his palm was damp and cool. You did your part, he said. You stayed, you held her hand, you shouted loud enough that someone heard you. Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears did not fall right away. He straightened the hallway, seeming longer than before. His legs ached in a way he had not noticed in the operating room. At the far end of the corridor, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Voices carried faintly from the direction of the administrative offices. Someone spoke his name. Michael took a breath, feeling the taste of metal and scrub soap still caught at the back of his throat. Then he turned toward the sound and started walking. The sound of his name faded as Michael walked. The surgical corridor narrowed into quieter halls. The clatter and low calls of the operating rooms gave way to muffled voices, the squeak of soles on polished tile, the distant steady hiss of air through vents. He passed a window that looked out over the ambulance bay. Snowflakes drifted past the glass in slow spirals, now softer than earlier. Red and blue lights still pulsed below, but less frantically, like a heartbeat that had slowed. At the intersection near the staff elevators, a clerk from admissions stood with a stack of folders pressed to her chest. Her eyes flicked to his face, then to the blood on his scrub pants. She did not say anything, but he saw the recognition in her expression. He reached the administrative wing. Here, the lighting was warmer, the walls painted in neutral earth tones. Framed photographs of smiling patients and ribbon-cutting ceremonies lined the corridor. A carpet runner muffled his steps. The smell changed, trading antiseptic and sweat for coffee and printed paper. At the end of the hall, beside a frosted glass door, a brass plaque read, Richard Klein, MD, Chief of Staff. The glass showed a blurred silhouette behind it moving back and forth. A secretary sat at a small desk outside the office, fingers resting on her keyboard. She had taken off her shoes, stocking feet tucked under her chair. When she saw Michael, she straightened and slid her shoes back on quickly. Dr. Hart, she said. Her voice had the careful tone of someone who already knew something had gone wrong. "He's expecting you." She reached for the intercom, but the office door opened before she could press the button. "Send him in, Claire," Richard Klein said. He stood just inside the doorway, tie-loosened white shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hair was a little mussed, the neat part disrupted. In one hand he held a tablet, in the other a paper cup with a brown coffee stain creeping over the rim. "Michael," he said, "come." Michael stepped past him into the office. The room was all smooth surfaces and quiet colors. A wide window looked out over the city, the lights below flickering against the gray sky. A leather chair sat behind a large desk. Two smaller chairs faced it. A bookshelf along one wall held reference texts and a few framed awards. On the far wall hung the hospital's mission statement in elegant lettering. St. Gabriel Medical Center, excellence, discipline, safety. Klein closed the door. The click was soft but final. "Sit," he said. Michael sat in one of the smaller chairs. The leather sighed under his weight. Klein walked around the desk but did not sit right away. He placed his tablet face down, then set the coffee cup beside it. A dark ring marked where it had already been. For a moment he looked out the window instead of at Michael. "You chose quite a night to return," he said. "I heard the sirens," Michael replied. "The building looked dark." "So you just walked in," Klein said. "I used to work here," Michael said. "My badge still opens the doors." Klein finally sank into his chair. The leather creaked. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Not for long," he said. He said. There was a pause. "I just came from OR 2, Klein added. "The staff are calling it a miracle, in case you were curious." Michael said nothing. "You opened a woman's chest in a backup theater during a power failure," Klein continued. "With no authorization, under limited power, with a jury-rigged suction system and a manual pump. You are aware of how that sounds if I read it out loud in a courtroom." "She was dying," Michael said, "on a gurney in a hallway waiting for the grid to settle." "You were not her attending physician, Paul," Klein said. "You were not even on duty. You are not credentialed here anymore, not for surgery. Outpatient consultation only. That was the entire point of the arrangement after the Miller case." Outside the office, a phone rang at another desk. The sound was thin through the walls. "So no one should have touched her?" Michael asked. "We should have watched her bleed into her own chest because the schedule did not have my name on it." "Do not twist my words," Klein said. A flush crept up from his collar. "This is not about caring or not caring. This is about structure, liability, systems that keep more than one patient safe." "She is alive," Michael said quietly. "For the moment," Klein answered. "And if she crashes tonight, if there is a complication from that procedure, if she ends up on a ventilator for weeks and the family's lawyer starts asking who decided to take her into OR2 during a blackout, under whose authority, under which protocol, what do you think happens then?" Michael looked at the mission statement on the wall. The word safety seemed to press outward. "I think," he said, "that you could also be asked what would have happened if we had left her in the trauma bay. Under whose authority we decided to let her die because the generator was inconvenient." Klein sighed. He rubbed his forehead with his fingers, leaving a faint shine. "You always did have a talent for rhetoric," he said. "It is not helping you here." He reached for the tablet and tapped the screen awake. The glow lit his face from below. "I already spoke with legal," he said. He said. They were very clear. "Any involvement you have inside an operating room in this building puts us at risk as an institution. The Miller family still has not fully let it go. The press still remembers your name." "That was 2 years ago," Michael said. "In liability terms, that is yesterday," Klein answered. He swiped through something on the tablet. "We are required to document this," he said. "A formal incident report will be filed. It will note that you performed an unauthorized procedure while not privileged for surgery in this facility during a power failure that should have grounded non-essential interventions." "I do not consider opening a tamponade non-essential," Michael said. Klein's eyes flashed. "You are not the one who gets called when the insurance carriers demand a meeting," he said. "You are not the one who sits in front of the board of trustees and explains why their flagship hospital is on the evening news again for a rogue surgeon ignoring protocol." Michael leaned forward slightly. "I did not see any cameras in OR2, he said. "I saw a woman with her chest crushed in and her heart drowning in her own blood. I saw a child begging someone to listen to her. That is what I saw." Klein stared at him for a long moment. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Michael?" he asked at last. "A better office," Michael said. Klein did not smile. "You hear one voice, one story, one room," he said. "You lock onto it with everything you have. That is what made you brilliant in the OR. It is also what makes you dangerous up here." He waved a hand encompassing the administrative floor, the window, the city beyond. I have to hear hundreds of voices at once, he went on. Patients' families, nurses, doctors, board members, regulators, attorneys, donors. I do not get the luxury of picking the one that sounds the most tragic and chasing it at full speed. I have to keep this whole place standing. Michael's hands rested on his knees. He could feel the faint tackiness of dried disinfectant on his fingers. So you keep it standing by making sure no one ever sticks their neck out, he said. I keep it standing, Klein said, by making sure we follow the book. The book is what keeps us from being sued into the ground, from losing accreditation, from closing our doors. Without it, no one gets treated. Not here, not anywhere. Michael looked back at the mission statement again. The words were etched into metal, glossy and firm. Discipline saves lives, he read aloud. Exactly, Klein said. Michael shook his head slowly. Discipline without a pulse is not medicine, he'd said. It is logistics. Klein's jaw tightened. His fingers drummed once on the desk. This is not a philosophy seminar, he said. This is an employment discussion. I am not employed here, Michael said. You made sure of that. A technicality, Klein said. You still carry our name, you still carry our history, which means when you act like this inside our walls, it lands on our record. He tapped the tablet again, then turned the screen so Michael could see. On it, a form was open. Fields waited for names, times, descriptions. This will go to the Medical Executive Committee, Klein said. They will decide whether to petition the state board to review your license again. At minimum, there will be a public statement clarifying that you do not hold surgical privileges here and that your actions tonight were outside of our policies. To protect the institution, Michael said. Klein did not deny it. To make sure one good outcome, if that is what this turns out to be, does not give every hot-headed resident in this building the idea that rules are optional when they feel like playing hero, he said. From somewhere in the building came the faint sound of applause. It was distant, muffled by floors and walls, but unmistakable. A ripple of clapping, then fading. Klein's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, then back to Michael. That will be the staff hearing that power is back, he said quickly. They are relieved. Michael said nothing. There is something else, Klein added. He rested his elbows on the desk and laced his fingers together. I would strongly advise you not to speak to the press about tonight. Not to local reporters, not to anyone. The hospital will have a unified message. Any deviation could complicate things for everyone, including you. I did not call the press, Michael said. I did not even think about them. Good, Klein said. Keep it that way. He set the tablet down again. The screen dimmed after a moment. I am not questioning that you are skilled, he said. I am not questioning that you care. I am telling you that what you did tonight is indefensible on paper. That is the reality. Michael stood. My reality, he said, is that a woman who was about to die is still alive enough to have a chart. You always did like to have the last word, Klein said. Michael looked at the window one more time. The snow had thickened, softening the city's sharp edges. I am done here, he said. He said. Not quite, Klein replied. Security will escort you off clinical floors. You are not to enter any operating room in this facility again without explicit permission. If you do, we will move to bar you entirely from the premises. Understood, Michael said. He turned toward the door. Michael, Klein said just before he opened it. He looked back. You think I do not care about that girl in the trauma bay, Klein said. You are wrong. I care. I also care about the 100 patients in ICU and the 1,000 in the city who will come through our doors this month, and the staff whose jobs depend on this hospital not imploding. Caring is not the issue. What is the issue? Michael asked. Control, Klein said, and you do not have it here anymore. Michael considered that for a heartbeat, then opened the door. Claire looked up from her desk as he stepped out. Her eyes darted to his face, then away. In the hallway beyond, a few nurses clustered near the elevators, talking in low voices. One of them, a senior nurse with gray at her temples, caught sight of him. She straightened, her expression a mixture of respect and worry. Dr. Hart, she said quietly. He gave her a small nod as he passed. The elevator doors opened with a chime. A security guard stood inside, hands clasped in front of him, eyes tired. Dr. Hart, the guard said, I have been asked to walk you down. Of course, Michael said. He stepped into the elevator. The guard followed, pressing the button for the main level. As the doors closed, the faint sounds of the hospital above filtered through. Monitors? Footsteps? A distant, thin voice calling out somewhere, answered by another. The car began to descend. Snow turned to a fine icy rain by the time Michael stepped outside. The security guard peeled off at the sliding doors with a nod that was more apology than enforcement. Michael crossed the drive, the automatic doors hissing closed behind him. The cold hit his damp scrubs and climbed straight into his bones. His car sat where he had left it, a thin crust of white frosting the roof. He unlocked it, slid behind the wheel, and sat there for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, eyes on the rearview mirror. Through the glass he could see the front of St. Gabriel, framed by falling snow. The emergency sign flickered weakly, but the windows above glowed steady again. A figure in yellow stood near the entrance, half hidden by a taller shape. "Emma." A nurse bent to say something to her. The girl hugged her arms around herself and nodded. Michael looked away. He started the engine and drove. Harbor Street was quieter than the hospital. Streetlights painted wet pavement in pale orange. The clinic was a dark shape at the corner, the hand-painted sign barely visible in the gloom. He parked, sat for a few seconds longer, then forced himself out of the car. Inside, the clinic smelled like it had that morning disinfectant coffee and worn fabric. The waiting room was empty now. Chairs sat askew, a glittering of dropped salt from boots along the floor. The heater hummed steadily. On the reception counter, Mia had left a note under a chipped mug. Dr. H left at 5. Took the last patient to the bus stop. Made a fresh pot. M. He poured himself coffee that had gone lukewarm and stood in the narrow hallway, letting the bitter taste anchor him. His hands were still clean in the technical sense. He had scrubbed twice before leaving the hospital, yet he could feel the ghost of blood on his fingers, the shape of a beating heart under his palms, the raw plea in a child's voice. He set the mug down. One by one he turned off the lights. The waiting room faded. The exam room sank into shadow. The heater clicked off with a reluctant sigh. He locked the door, stepped back into the damp cold, and walked home through a city that looked the same as it had the night before, even though something in his chest sat differently. 2 days passed. Harbor Street filled and emptied again. The ache in Michael's shoulders settled into a dull companion. He checked his phone once or twice out of habit, expecting some official message, some notification from the board. Nothing came. He called the hospital once. The operator transferred him to ICU, then to a nurse's station. A tired voice answered, asked him to spell the name. "Dana Brooks," he said. There was a pause, the clicking of keys. "She's in the cardiac ICU," the nurse said. "Still critical, but stable enough for us to say that word out loud. We are keeping her sedated. There is a little girl who has not left the waiting area much. Staff have been taking turns making sure she eats." "Thank you," Michael said. He hung up before the nurse could ask who he was. On the evening of the 3rd day, as he was finishing with a patient complaining of numb fingers from uncontrolled diabetes, the bell above the clinic door jangled. Mia looked up from the front desk. "I'm Dr. Hart," she called. "You might want to see this." Michael closed the chart, squeezed the man's shoulder with a promise to adjust his medication, and stepped into the waiting room. 2 figures stood just inside the door. Dana Brooks looked smaller, sitting on an ER gurney. Standing upright in the clinic, leaning on a cane, she seemed at once fragile and stubborn. A thick coat draped over her shoulders, unbuttoned at the top to accommodate a bandage beneath her shirt. Her skin was pale lips, chapped eyes ringed with bruise-colored fatigue. Emma hovered at her side, holding tight to her mother's coat sleeve. Her yellow dress had been replaced by jeans and a hoodie that hung a little too big. The same barrette was clipped in her hair. Mia stood behind the counter, eyebrows raised as if to say she had not invited this surprise. "Hi," Emma said. The word came out thin but clear. Michael blinked once, then walked toward them. "Hi," he said back. "You are far from your floor." "They discharged her," Emma said. Pride and worry wrestled in her expression. "Not quite," Dana cut in, her voice rough but steady. "They decided to try their luck with me at home between checkups. I needed to make a stop first." She shifted her weight, winced, and pressed one hand lightly against her chest. "You should sit," Michael said automatically. "Bossy," Dana said, but she let him guide her to a chair. Emma sat down beside her, still holding onto her coat. For a moment they sat like that, catching their breath. "I do not remember much," Dana said. "Headlights, noise, then nothing, then bits of voices. I woke up with tubes and beeping, and this one curled up in a plastic chair like a cat." Emma leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. "They told me somebody opened me up in the dark," Dana continued. "Said the surgeon was not even supposed to be there, that he might get in trouble for what he did." She looked up at Michael. "That was you," she said. "It was not a question." "Yes," he said. She watched his face like she was trying to see past it to the night itself. "They said you could have lost everything," she said. "Your license, your clinic, whatever is left of your name, that you were already in some kind of mess from before. So I'm asking you." Her fingers tightened on the cane handle. She swallowed, throat working. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that for a stranger who might die on your table anyway?" Mia shifted behind the counter. The heater kicked on with a soft thump. Michael thought about all the ways he could answer. He could say it was what any doctor would have done. that it was routine, that it was not as risky as it sounded. He could translate it into something smooth and digestible. Instead, he told the truth. Because if I had not, he said, I do not think I could live with myself. Dana studied him. The room was quiet enough to hear the soft tick of the cheap wall clock. That's simple, she asked. Not simple, he said, but clear. Emma frowned as if working through words that were too big. They said you got in trouble last time, she said, before my mom. He glanced at her. They said you tried to fix a dad and he died and people got mad at you, she went on. Is that true? Yes, Michael said. You did everything you could, Emma said, right? He thought of Jacob Miller, of the open chest of the dinosaur on the floor. I thought I was, he said. Emma was quiet for a long heartbeat. Did you do everything you could for my mom? She asked. This time the answer came easier. Yes, he said. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his middle. The hug was sudden and awkward. Her forehead pressed into his ribs. Her fingers clutched the back of his scrub top. He froze for a fraction of a second, then lowered a hand to her shoulder, the gestures reversed from the hospital hallway. Thank you, she said into his shirt. The words were muffled but unmistakable. Dana cleared her throat. I'm not good with speeches, she said. We just wanted to see you before everyone else showed up at your door. Tessa Grant has been sniffing around the ICU like a bloodhound. Mia made a small noise. The reporter, she asked, from Channel 7. That is the one, Dana said. Someone at the hospital told her bits and pieces. She tried to talk to me. I told her I was going home first. She shifted again, adjusting her grip on the cane. But she will find us, Dana added. She's very good at her job, and when she does, she will ask about you. Michael straightened. Emma released him and wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Tell her whatever you want, he said. Dana smiled, a small tilt of the mouth. Oh, I will, she said. That is partly why I came, to make sure I get it right when I say your name. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Also, she said, someone has something for you. She nudged Emma. The girl fumbled with the paper cheeks coloring. I made this at the hospital, Emma said. But you were gone, so I kept it. I wanted to give it to you where you actually are. She handed him the paper. It was a square of bright purple, the kind that came from classroom supply cabinets folded carefully into thirds. The edges were a little frayed, as if it had been opened and closed many times. Michael unfolded it. In the center, in thick, slightly uneven letters, someone had written, He was the only one who heard me. A small heart sat in the corner, drawn with a shaky hand. Michael felt something tighten high in his chest. He rubbed his thumb lightly over the words. The marker had bled a little into the paper, softening the edges. Thank you, he said quietly. He folded the note back along its creases. His hands moved on their own, opening, his wallet sliding the paper into a slot where a hospital badge once lived. The plastic of the old ID pressed against the new scrap of color. Can we come back? Emma asked. Sometimes to say hi. This is a clinic, Michael said, not a playground. Emma's face fell a fraction. But, he added, it is also a place for people who need to be heard. So if you find yourself in the neighborhood, I will not lock the door. Her smile returned small but real. They stayed a few minutes more. Michael checked Dana's vitals, listened to her lungs, adjusted the angle of her cane. He wrote a note on a prescription pad with follow-up instructions and a phone number. As they left, the bell over the door jangled again. Cold air spilled in around them. Dana paused on the threshold. They might drag you under in the news, she said. There are people who owe you, even if they do not want to admit it. If you need somebody to say it out loud, you call me. He nodded. Emma waved, then disappeared into the night with her mother. The clinic felt smaller after they left. Michael stood at the reception counter, fingers resting on the worn laminate. The purple note was a small weight in his wallet. Mia cleared her throat. Do you know who Tessa Grant is? She asked. Reporter, he said, a local station. She did the piece on the nursing home that was covering up infections, Mia said. And the one about the pharmacy charging triple prices in low-income neighborhoods. She does not let go of things. Michael lifted one shoulder. Then she will do what she does, he said. Mia opened her mouth, then closed it again. She went back to sorting files, lips pressed together. That night, Michael fell asleep in a chair with an open medical journal on his chest. The television across the room flickered silently, sound muted. He did not see the late news teaser showing a grainy shot of St. Gabriel's entrance, the caption reading, Disgraced surgeon returns in blackout drama. The next morning, the city woke to headlines. Local surgeon defies blackout to save mother, hero, or hazard. Blackout miracle at St. Gabriel. Screens in coffee shops and laundromats cycled the same footage. An ambulance arriving. A still photograph of Michael from 2 years earlier, taken on a different day in a different life. White coat, crisp tie straight. A child's voice underlaid the images. He helped my mom when nobody else would. Emma said into a microphone that almost swallowed her face. Her eyes shone under the studio lights. He was the only one who heard me. The purple note appeared in the camera frame, held carefully in small fingers. The words were clear. Carla, caught in the hallway outside ICU, tried to duck away but was pulled gently back by Tessa Grant with a practiced hand. "Can you confirm that Dr. Hart was in the operating room that night?" Tessa asked. Carla hesitated, eyes darting toward a closed door where she knew administrators were meeting. "Yes," she said finally, "he was there." "Did the hospital authorize the procedure?" Tessa asked. Carla's mouth tightened. "He saved her," she said. "That is what I know." The clip ran on a loop. At Harbor Street, patients arrived with folded newspapers with phones already open to the story. Someone left a copy of the local paper on the clinic counter, headlines circled in blue pen. By midday, the phone at the front desk would not stop ringing. Some calls were requests for comment. Some were appointment requests from people who suddenly knew his name. Some were hang-ups, dead air that hummed with something unsaid. In an office high above the city, Richard Klein watched the same footage on a muted screen mounted to a conference room wall. Across the bottom of the broadcast, a ticker scrolled hospital statements from other institutions, commentators speculating on ethics and risk. The image froze on a still frame of Emma's note. "He was the only one who heard me." Around the table, board members shifted in their chairs. "We have to respond," one of them said. "Schedule a press conference," another added. "Today." Klein reached for his coffee, hand steady. "Already in motion," he said. The auditorium at St. Gabriel was not built for crisis. It usually hosted lectures on new procedures, donor luncheons, the occasional retirement party. The carpet was a shade of blue meant to look neutral. The stage held a podium with the hospital logo and a long table draped in white, set with small name placards and bottles of water. On this day, every seat was filled. Reporters lined the aisles, badges swinging from lanyards. Camera crews had parked tripods in the back and along the sides. Light panels turned the air near the front into a pale artificial glow. At the podium, a banner read, "St. Gabriel Medical Center Press Briefing." A low buzz of conversation ran through the room. Phrases drifted in fragments. "Unauthorized surgery. Oop. Dolpa. Turshche. Blackout protocol. Hero doc." The noise thinned when Richard Klein stepped out from the side door and crossed to the podium. He wore a dark suit that fit well, the knot of his tie perfectly centered. His expression was sober, carefully arranged. Behind him, 2 members of the board took seats at the long table along with the hospital's legal counsel. A few chairs remained empty. Klein cleared his throat, once leaned toward the microphone and adjusted it slightly. "Good afternoon," he said. "Thank you for coming." The opening flash of camera shutters flickered like a brief storm. "As you are aware," he continued, "St. Gabriel Medical Center experienced a power failure 3 nights ago during a severe weather event. Our backup systems engaged, and our staff responded with professionalism and dedication to maintain patient safety across all units." On a screen behind him, a still image appeared. The hospital entrance under falling snow. Ambulances under the canopy, staff in coats moving quickly. During this time, Klein went on, one patient, Ms. Dana Brooks, required emergency intervention. The circumstances were complex, and a former member of our surgical staff, Dr. Michael Hart, participated in her care in a manner that did not follow established protocols. A ripple moved through the room. Pens scratched. Someone whispered Hart's name with a low whistle. "We are deeply relieved that Ms. Brooks survived, Monsieur," Klein said. "Every life matters to us. At the same time, medical integrity and patient safety require that we adhere to institutional guidelines designed to protect all patients, not only in one case, but across the board." He paused to take a sip of water, letting the words settle. "We are conducting a full review of the events of that night," he said. "Until that review is complete, we will not be commenting on specific clinical decisions. We can, however, confirm that Dr. Hart does not hold surgical privileges at St. Gabriel Medical Center. Any actions taken by him in an operative capacity were outside of our current policies." Hands shot up across the audience. Klein nodded toward a reporter in the front row. "Mr. Sanchez, he said. The man stood slightly microphone in hand. "Daniel Sanchez Tribune," he said. "If Dr. Hart's actions were outside your policies, are you saying he should not have intervened, even if that means Ms. Brooks would have died?" Murmurs rose. Klein kept his gaze level. "I am saying," he replied, "that we have protocols in place for emergencies, including power failures. Those protocols exist because ad hoc decision-making creates unacceptable risk. We have to look at the long-term safety of all patients, not only the outcome of a single case." Another hand, another voice. "Jennifer Cole, Channel 7, a woman said. "The public response has been strong. Many see Dr. Hart as a hero who stepped in when your systems failed. How do you respond to accusations that St. Gabriel prioritized procedure over a patient's life. Klein's jaw flexed. We reject that characterization, he said. Our staff worked tirelessly through very difficult conditions to keep every patient safe. Any attempt to turn this into a simplistic narrative of heroes and villains does a disservice to the reality of complex medical care. Near the back of the room, Tessa Grant waited with her notebook open. She had not raised her hand yet. Her pen-rested idle eyes narrowed slightly. A third reporter stood. Dr. Klein, I'd say, he said. If the rules conflict with saving a life, which one do you prioritize? This time the room went very still. The question hung in the air sharp as a scalpel. Klein opened his mouth and closed it again. A faint color touched his cheeks. We prioritize the long-term safety of all patients through standardized procedures, he said. Abandoning those when they are inconvenient is not an option. So there are situations, Monsieur Caron, the reporter pressed, where you would allow a patient to die in order to protect policies. No, Klein said quickly, that is not what I said. That is what it sounds like someone else called. Voices began to overlap. A cameraman shifted position, zooming in on Klein's face. The legal counsel leaned toward his microphone, but Klein lifted a hand to quiet him. We understand the emotions involved, he said. We truly do, but hospitals cannot be run on emotion. They are run on systems. Without those, you have chaos. Some might say you had chaos anyway, Tessa said. She had not raised her hand, but her voice carried clearly. Klein's gaze snapped to her. Ms. Grant, he said, if you have a question, please state it. She remained seated, pen still resting on the page. My question is simple, she said. Who, if anyone at St. Gabriel, is willing to say into that microphone that on that night in that trauma bay, someone should have told Dr. Hart to stop? A hush fell over the room, even the clicks of cameras slowed. Klein exhaled through his nose. This is not about second-guessing in hindsight, he said. It is about setting expectations going forward. We cannot endorse unauthorized interventions. Doing so would open the door to reckless behavior. He reached for his prepared notes as if to shift to safer ground. The side door of the auditorium opened. 2 figures stepped in. They did not look like they belonged at a press conference. There was no media badge on their clothes, no notebook or camera. Just a woman leaning heavily on a cane and a girl supporting her with one small hand. For a moment, no one noticed them. Then a camera near the aisle swung in their direction. The motion drew other eyes. The murmur in the room changed pitch curiosity folding in. Dana Brooks paused just inside the door. The effort of getting there showed in the way she held herself, shoulders tight, lips pressed together against pain. Emma hovered at her side, fingers wrapped around the plastic handle of the cane hair, pulled back in a neater version of the hospital barrette style. Her eyes were wide, taking in the rows of faces, the bright lights, the banner. An usher hurried toward them, hand raised, as if to redirect them back out, but he hesitated when he saw the cameras shifting the way the front of the room had turned toward them like a field of flowers following the sun. Klein saw them too. Color drained from his face, then rushed back. This is a closed briefing, he said into the microphone. Ma'am, I'm afraid you cannot be in here. Dana ignored him. She moved down the aisle at an uneven pace, cane tapping the carpet, Emma guiding her around bag cables and tripod legs. Reporters instinctively pulled back their equipment, leaving a narrow path. Tessa stared, then stood up, moving to the side to give them space. At the front, one of the board members half rose from his chair. Security at the back of the room exchanged a look, but did not move fast enough to get ahead of the moment. Dana reached the front and stopped near the podium. The height difference between her and Klein was more visible up close. She adjusted her grip on the cane, then gestured toward a nearby microphone on a stand. Can I? She asked. It was addressed to no one in particular, but a tech had already moved, lowering the stand and pushing it toward her. She took a breath. The sound was audible in the microphone, the slight catch in it amplified over the room. My name is Dana Brooks, she said. Her voice shook on the first word, then firmed. I think you have been talking about me. On the screen behind Klein, the image changed. A file photo of Dana from her chart flashed up, then cut back to the hospital entrance. Someone scrambled to pull it. If it were not for that man you keep mentioning, she said, I would be dead. Camera lights flared brighter. Someone whispered an excited curse. Tessa lifted her pen again, but did not look down at the page. I do not know what rules you have on your papers, Dana went on. I do not know what your blackout protocols say. I just know what it felt like to wake up with a hole cut in my chest that hurt like hell, and to see my kid sitting in a chair with dark circles under her eyes and a smile that looked like it might crack her face open. A small laugh, ragged at the edges, ran through the crowd. They told me my heart stopped, she said, that my lungs were crushed, that every minute counted, and that one doctor took me to a room with barely any power and opened me up anyway. She turned her head, looking directly at Klein. I did not see you there, she said. Klein's mouth tightened. They say you care about systems, Dana continued. That is fine. Systems are important, but systems left me on a bed in a hallway waiting for a light to come back on. A man with blood on his hands and a bad reputation decided that was not enough. Emma stepped forward. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out the purple note. The same folds creased its surface. She smoothed it once with her palm and then, without asking, placed it on the skirted table in front of Klein directly over his neatly stacked papers. "This is the only evidence I have," she said. Her voice carried more clearly than her mother's, the microphone catching every syllable. "They keep talking about protocols. I do not know what that word means. I just know he was the only one who heard me." A camera zoomed in on the note. The monitor at the back of the room showed the words in tight focus. "He was the only one who heard me." Silence held for several long seconds. Then a reporter spoke. "Dr. Klein," she said, "do you want to respond to that?" Klein's fingers hovered above the purple square as if afraid to touch it. He cleared his throat. "We are glad Ms. Brooks is with us today," he said. The words sounded thin, worn at the edges. "We are grateful for every life saved in this institution." "That is not an answer," Tessa said. All eyes swung to her. "You have spent the last 20 minutes talking about liability," she went on. "You have made it clear that Dr. Hart broke your rules. The question is simple. If he had followed your rules, would Ms. Brooks be standing here?" Klein's mouth opened. No sound came out for a moment. "I will not engage in hypotheticals," he said finally. "It is not hypothetical," Dana said into her microphone. "It is me." From a few rows back, a new voice cut in. "I was in the operating room," it said. Heads turned. Dr. Javier Morales stood near the aisle, still in scrubs, his hair flattened by a cap he had taken off in a hurry. A hospital ID badge swung at his chest. He looked younger than most of the men at the table, but his eyes were steady. Klein's expression darkened. "Dr. Morales," he said, "this is not the time." "It is exactly the time," Morales said. He lifted his chin slightly. "You want facts. I have facts." He stepped into the aisle, taking a few steps forward so that the cameras could see him. "Ms. Brooks had a cardiac tamponade," he said. Her heart was being squeezed by blood trapped in the pericardial sac. Every minute she stayed in that trauma bay waiting for power, her chance of survival dropped. By the time we got her to OR2, she was barely perfusing. He glanced at Dana, then back at the front. "Dr. Hart opened her chest under conditions I would not wish on anyone," Morales said. "Limited light, manual suction, battery power that was ticking down. It was not a stunt. It was not a glory move. It was a precise, necessary call made by someone who knew exactly what failing to act would mean." He let the words hang, then added, "If he had waited for full power, we would have been wheeling a body to the morgue, not a patient to ICU." The room seemed to breathe in. One of the board members shifted, looking down at his hands. The legal counsel stared at the table as if something might rise from the grain to rescue him. Near the end of the table, Dr. Evelyn Chen, a long-standing member of the Medical Executive Committee, pushed her chair back. The scrape of its legs on the stage floor was loud in the quiet. She stood, adjusted her glasses, and looked from Dana to Emma to Morales to Klein. Then she stepped away from the table and walked off the stage. No one stopped her. The movement broke whatever tension had pinned the room. Clapping began near the back. One of the nurses who had slipped into the audience, still in scrubs, slapped her hands together once, twice, then harder. Another joined. The sound rolled forward like a wave. Within seconds, most of the room was on its feet. Reporters, nurses, residents, even a few board members. The applause filled the space, drowning out the muffled protest of someone near the podium trying to restore order. On the screen behind Klein, the image had locked again on the note in front of him, the words simple and uneven. "He was the only one who heard me." Klein sat very still. The cameras caught everything. The clip of the press conference had a long life. By evening, the footage had spread far beyond Chicago. Not just the part where Klein talked about protocols, but the moment Dana took the microphone, when Emma laid the purple note on the table, when Javier Morales stepped into the aisle and said the word morgue out loud. "He was the only one who heard me." That line appeared across screens in a dozen fonts. Someone turned it into a graphic with a heartbeat running underneath. Others posted their own version stories of times they felt ignored in hospital rooms and clinics and offices. The hashtag came after, a simple tag under a shaky phone video of Emma clutching the microphone. Within a day, it sat at the top of trending lists. Michael saw none of this in real time. Harbor Street Free Clinic did not have a television in the waiting room. The radio stayed off most days because static bled between the stations. The only screen in regular use was the old desktop at the front desk, where Mia scheduled appointments and printed lab slips. Even so, the story seeped in. Patients arrived with folded newspapers, edges softened from being passed from hand to hand. Someone taped one of the front pages to the reception counter. The headline sat above a grainy freeze frame of Michael in Scrub's mask, pulled down, eyes tired. Harbor Street, Dr. Save's mother, in blackout license, in limbo. You look taller in person, one man said, nodding at the photo as Michael called his name. I look younger in that picture, Michael replied. He did not read the article all the way through. His eyes skimmed the first few lines, then dropped to the date printed under the masthead as if that mattered more. The phone at the clinic rang almost constantly for 2 days. Some callers were reporters, voices too cheerful at odd hours asking for comment. Some were strangers leaving messages of thanks or outrage, insisting he had done the right thing or accusing him of grandstanding. A few were other physicians saying they understood that they were tired of feeling like box checkers instead of doctors. Michael let most of it roll to voicemail. Harbor Street had no receptionist beyond Mia, and she already had 3 jobs. We cannot keep ignoring all of them, she said at one point, the receiver tucked between her cheek and shoulder. We can ignore the ones that are not sick, he said. Anyone calling for a quote can call the hospital. What about this one? She muttered, listening. He says he's from the state medical board. Michael stopped in the middle of the hallway. Put him through, he said. She held out the phone. He wiped his hands on a towel and took it. Dr. Hart, he said. Dr. Hart, this is Harold Price with the Illinois Medical Licensing Board, a man's voice said. It sounded older, precise, with a Midwestern flattening on some vowels. Am I catching you at a bad time? I am at work, Michael said. So yes, but go ahead. Price made a small sound that might have been a chuckle. I will be brief, he said. The board convened an emergency session this morning. Recent events at St. Gabriel have, as I'm sure you know, drawn significant public attention. I have heard the rumors, Michael said. Along with public attention came quite a lot of documentation, Price continued. We have reviewed the operative notes from your case testimony from staff and reports from the hospital's own internal review. Michael waited. We also revisited the Miller case, Price said. In light of advances in guidelines and some new evidence presented by colleagues of yours, who apparently decided to dig back through the literature on prolonged bypass. Something loosened slightly between Michael's shoulders. The board has voted unanimously to restore your license to full unrestricted status, Price said, effective immediately. Michael's fingers tightened around the phone. You are not placing any additional conditions, he asked. No, Price said. Your record will reflect that your prior restrictions have been lifted. You will receive a formal letter by mail, but I wanted you to hear it before you saw it on the internet. Michael leaned back against the wall. Thank you, he said. We do not usually say this, Price added, but speaking only for myself, I'm glad you were in that operating room, Dr. Hart. I have a granddaughter about that girl's age. I would want someone to hear her too. A lump rose unexpectedly in Michael's throat. Take care of your patients, Price said. The rest of it will shake out in the press. The call ended with a soft click. Michael lowered the phone and stood for a moment listening to the familiar clinic sounds filter back in, the hum of the heater, the cough of someone in the waiting room. Mia muttering at the computer. Well, she asked, peering around the corner. They voted, he said, full reinstatement. Her face broke into a grin. About time, she said. I would bake a cake if I could afford an oven. I do not need a cake, he said. You need better jokes, she said, and vanished back to the desk. He tucked the receiver back into its cradle, then reached into his pocket for his wallet. The old badge was still in there, plastic edges scuffed, lettering slightly faded. He slid it out and looked at it for a long beat. The photo showed a younger man with fewer lines on his face and a tie that someone else had probably told him to straighten. He flipped it over. The magnetic strip had a thin scratch down the center. Behind the badge, the purple square waited. He touched it lightly, feeling the ridge of folded paper. He put both back into the wallet and closed it. That afternoon, a courier appeared at the clinic with 2 envelopes. The first bore the letterhead of the Illinois Medical Licensing Board. The language inside was formal, precise, almost dry. It repeated what Price had told him on the phone. The restriction imposed after the Miller case was lifted. His license was once again without limitation. The second envelope carried the logo of St. Gabriel Medical Center. Michael opened it at the small desk in the exam room, leaning on one elbow, a chart open beside his hand. Dr. Hart. In light of recent developments and following the restoration of your full license, we would like to invite you to consider rejoining St. Gabriel as an attending surgeon in the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery. We are prepared to offer. He skimmed past the numbers, the titles, the bullet points, outlining benefits and support. The words were generous. Someone had tried to make them sound warm. He set the letter aside face down. The next patient knocked on the door. Come in, Michael said. A woman in her 50s stepped in, clutching her coat around her. Her hair was pulled back in a quick knot, lines etched deep around her mouth. She moved like someone who was used to making herself small. Mrs. Nguyen Fidepki Aisa, said, he asked, checking the chart. She nodded. You said you have been having headaches, he said, and feeling tired. For months, she said. Her accent was soft vowels rounded. I go to urgent care, they give me pills. They say it is stress. I work a lot. They say I need to rest. Do you, he asked. She blinked. Do you rest, declared Fabame. Itika, na clarikshad? She gave a little laugh with no humor. I clean offices at night, she said. And I take care of my grandson in the day, no time to rest. He gestured toward the exam table. Sit, he said. Tell me when it started. She sat carefully perching on the edge as though she might slide off if she relaxed. It was not so bad at first, she said. Just a little ache, then more. Some days I feel like my head is full of cotton. My eyes blur. Sometimes I feel sick to my stomach for no reason. He took her blood pressure, watched the numbers rise, then fall when the cuff deflated. Any chest pain, Hebe? He asked. No, she said. Dizziness, shortness of breath. Sometimes it feels like I cannot catch my breath when I am at home, she admitted. I think maybe I'm getting old. He listened to her heart, then her lungs. They sounded mostly clear, a slight wheeze at the bases, but nothing that matched the intensity of her complaints. Tell me about your home, he said. She looked surprised. My apartment, she asked. Yes, he said. Where is it? Basement level, she said. Near the river, cheap. It smells like wet sometimes. How do you heat it, he asked. She frowned, thinking. There's an old gas heater, she said. My landlord put it in. It makes a clicking sound when it starts. She mimed something catching. Sometimes it smells funny. Funny how, he asked. Like exhaust, she said. Like when a bus goes by and you are too close. Sweet a little. My grandson coughs when he sleeps near it. I put him in the other room now. Michael felt a thread of unease wind through his chest. Do the headaches get worse when you are home? He asked. She nodded slowly. And better when you are at work. Maybe, she said. I'm tired at work too, but my head feels clearer there. He put his stethoscope down. Mrs. Nguyen, he said, I think there might be a problem with your heater. With the gas, it is burning. She adjusted her coat, nervous. You mean a leak? She asked. Something like that, he said. It could be releasing a gas you cannot see or smell clearly, but it can make you very sick. Headache, nausea, fatigue, trouble thinking. If it builds up enough, it can be very dangerous. Her eyes widened. You think my apartment is making me sick? She said. I think it is worth checking, he said. I'm going to call the fire department and ask them to send someone to test the air, and I am going to ask if you and your grandson can stay with a relative or a friend tonight. She clutched her coat tighter. I do not want to make trouble, she said. This is not trouble, he said. This is your body whispering that something is wrong. You listened enough to come here. I am listening enough to pay attention. He stepped out into the hallway, found the phone at the nurse's station, and called the non-emergency fire line. He spoke to a calm voice on the other end, explained the situation, gave the address. We will send a crew with a meter, the dispatcher said. Better safe than sorry. Better alive than polite, Michael murmured after he hung up. An hour later, Mrs. Nguyen's daughter called the clinic. Her voice shook with a mix of fear and relief. They said the heater was leaking, she said. Carbon monoxide, the whole building. They shut it off. They said if we had waited longer, my mother could have gone to sleep and not woken up. Michael listened, then told her to bring Mrs. Nguyen back in 2 days for follow-up. He hung up and leaned against the counter, letting the weight of that settle. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was the kind of thing that could have been so easily missed. Mia came over with a stack of charts. You saved another one, she said. I listened, he said. Listened, he said. Sometimes that is the same thing, she replied. Late that night, when the clinic was empty and the heater ticking as it cooled, Michael sat at the small desk in the exam room. The St. Gabriel offer lay in front of him. He picked it up again, reread the opening paragraph, then the closing. We believe your skills would be a valuable addition to our team once more. St. Gabriel is committed to learning from recent events and to evolving our culture of care. He reached for a pen, hesitated, then wrote in the margin. Thank you for the invitation. At this time, my work at Harbor Street remains my priority. He signed his name, folded the letter, and slid it back into the envelope. On the other side of the city, St. Gabriel began to shift in small ways. In a conference room, someone pinned a new poster to a bulletin board. Before you order a test, ask one more question. In staff meetings, nurses and residents started talking about narrative notes, short sections in the chart, where they could write not just symptoms and labs, but 1 or 2 lines about who the patient was, what their life outside the hospital looked like. Someone jokingly called it the listening protocol. The name stuck. In the weeks that followed, St. Gabriel quietly added it to internal documents. At Harbor Street, the changes were less formal. Michael saw more faces, heard more stories. Word had spread not just that he had done something dramatic in an operating room, but that he took time in a small, cramped exam room to ask where the heater was, how many people lived in the apartment, what the cheapest food at the corner store was. One evening, as he gathered his things to leave, Mia pointed at the hand-painted sign above the clinic door. "We should change that," she said. "Harbor Street Free Clinic sounds like a temporary tent. You are a bit more permanent than that now." "What did you have in mind?" he asked. He asked. She thought for a moment. "Heart Center," she said. "No, heart something. People like words that sound reassuring." He thought of the purple note in his wallet, of Emma's voice in the hallway, of the way Mrs. Nguyen's daughter had sounded when she said the heater was leaking. "How about this?" he said. "The Heart Foundation. Listening saves lives." Mia tried the words out in a low voice. "I like it," she said. "It sounds official." "It is just paint," he said. "It can get paint," he said. "Sometimes paint is where things start," she replied. She locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. Outside, the city moved in its usual patterns. Buses hissed at curbs. People hurried along sidewalks, collars turned up against the wind. Michael slipped his wallet back into his pocket and stepped into the night, the echo of the day's voices trailing with him like the last notes of a fading song. The new sign went up on a bright, cold morning. The old hand-painted board that read Harbor Street Free Clinic came down with a groan of old nails. In its place, two men from the neighborhood hardware store hoisted a fresh piece of wood letters carved clean and painted dark blue. The Heart Foundation. Listening saves lives. Michael stood on the sidewalk with a roll of tape in his hand, as if he were supposed to be helping. In truth, he only watched. The winter light caught the new paint and turned it almost black. "Looks good," Mia said, squinting up at it. "Looks like you planned it that way all along." "I did not," Michael said. "Still works," she replied. Inside, nothing dramatic changed. The exam room stayed small. The heater still rattled. The coffee still tasted like it had boiled too long. The patients who filtered in did not care what name was on the building as long as someone listened when they spoke. They did sometimes glance at the sign on their way out and smile. Months passed, then a year, then a year. More. St. Gabriel sent other letters. Some were stiff legalistic summaries of policy changes. Some were warmer invitations to participate in committees or discussions about quality improvement. One written in a more personal tone than the rest came from Dr. Evelyn Chen. Michael read that one twice. "We are trying to do better," she wrote. "You shook something loose here, whether you meant to or not. The young doctors quote you when they argue about bedside time. It might surprise you to know that." He did not answer that letter immediately. When he finally did, his response was short. "If you want my help with teaching, I am willing to talk." The meeting was set in a low-key way. No press, no fanfare, just a Tuesday morning on a floor he had not walked in years. He arrived at St. Gabriel with his wallet in his pocket and a Heart Foundation sweatshirt under his coat. The revolving door at the main entrance made the same soft whoosh it always had. The smell inside mixed new paint with the older scent of polish and disinfectant. In the conference room off the internal medicine ward, 3 residents sat with notebooks open. A few nurses had claimed chairs along the back wall. Morales leaned against a windowsill with a folder tucked under his arm. Evelyn Chen sat near the door glasses low on her nose. "Thank you for coming," she said. Michael took a seat at the front, not behind the lectern, but in a plain metal chair. The room was smaller than the auditorium where the press conference had been held, the ceiling lower, the lights hummed. "We wanted someone to talk about complication management," one of the residents said, a young woman with hair pulled into a tight bun. "Morales said you handle that a little differently." Michael wrapped his fingers around the edge of his chair. "You have rounds for lab values and imaging, he said. You have conferences for rare diseases. I am not going to repeat those." He let his gaze travel over the faces in front of him. "Tell me about the last patient who surprised you," he said. Not with their lab, but with something they said. There was a pause. Then slowly they began to talk. One resident told a story about a man who kept missing dialysis because he was caring for his sister's children. Another described a woman who complained of insomnia until someone finally asked about the neighbor's constant shouting through the wall. The room shifted as they spoke. The lines between disciplines softened. Nurses chimed in. Morales added a memory of a time he prescribed a diet that was impossible for someone who had nowhere to cook. Michael did not lecture so much as guide. Sometimes he asked a question that made the room pause. Sometimes he offered a very practical suggestion that came not from a textbook but from long days in a cramped exam room on Harbor Street. "You are taught to listen for rails, murmurs, rubs," he said at one point. "Keep doing that. Just do not forget that the rest of the person is making noises too." When the hour ended, no one moved right away. Evelyn stood and walked with him to the door. "We call it the listening seminar," she said. Informally, attendance has been better than some of our required sessions. He nodded. A hospital can learn, she said. It was not a question. It can't, he said, so can people. He stepped back into the hallway. A nurse passed pushing a linen cart. Somewhere a monitor chimed a familiar rhythm. Nearby a baby cried and was quickly soothed. At the elevator bank he hesitated. The operating room levels were just a few buttons away. His thumb hovered near the panel, then dropped. He pressed the button for the main floor instead. He had walked into enough operating rooms for one lifetime. At the Heart Foundation, mornings began with a line at the door. Sometimes the line wrapped around the corner, a ragged ribbon of coats and hats and tired faces. Elderly men with canes, women with strollers, teenagers with hoodies pulled tight. A few of them came because of headlines. Most came because someone they trusted had said, "Try that place on Harbor." They listen. One afternoon when the waiting room was particularly crowded, a familiar voice cut through the low buzz. "You need more chairs," it said. He looked up. Emma stood near the door, one hand on the strap of a backpack. She was taller now, shoulders broader. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot with a pen stuck through it. The barrette had been replaced. "You can write a grant for more chairs," Michael said. "Funny you should mention grants," she said, crossing the room. "I have been reading about them all semester." He blinked. "Semester," he repeated. She grinned. "Pre-med," she said. "University of Michigan. I volunteer here when I am home. I told you that last time." "You were 16 last time," he said. "Time passes," she replied. "You look the same." "That is not true," he said. She dropped the backpack near the counter. "Put me to work," she said. "I need clinical hours, and you need someone who can find the extra blood pressure cuffs you keep losing." Mia handed her a stack of intake forms before he could answer. "Start here," she said. "We will test whether med school has taught you how to spell hypertension." Emma rolled her eyes and took the forms. She came back winter after winter, summer after summer, in between semesters. Sometimes she stayed a week, sometimes a month. She took vitals, fetched water, helped translate for patients who felt more at ease with someone closer to their age. She watched him in the exam room when she could. The way he leaned against the counter instead of sitting behind the desk. The way he asked, "What does a normal day look like for you? Before how long have you had the pain?" Once late in the day, she found him standing by the sink, fingers flexing slightly over the basin. "Bad, you?" Yeah, I'd asked. He shook his head. "Just remembering," he said. She did not know exactly what he meant, but she had learned enough not to press. On a crisp autumn evening many years later, after the last patient left, and Mia turned off the waiting room lights, Emma lingered in the doorway of the exam room. "I need to go," she said. "I have a train." "You could stay one more night," he said. "I have orientation," she said. "If I'm late, they will give my cadaver to someone else." He made a face. "That is a sentence I did not need," he said as She laughed. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, thick cream-colored, the kind that came with real effort behind it. "This is for you," she said. He took it, thumb tracing the edge. "Read it later," she added quickly. "Or now, actually probably later. I wrote too much." She stepped forward and hugged him harder than she had in the hospital hallway years before. He felt the sharp angle of her shoulder, the solid warmth. "Thank you," she said into his shirt. "For my mom, for this place, for ruining me for any other version of medicine." He did not trust his voice enough to answer. Her train pulled away from the station not long after, heading toward a campus with new buildings and anatomy labs and lecture halls. She would write sometimes. Short notes at first. Longer ones later, full of small victories and frustrations, difficult patients and professors who did not listen as much as they talked. He read every one. On the night he opened the envelope she had handed him, the streets outside, the Heart Foundation, were quiet. The last bus had grown past. The heater hummed. He sat at the desk with the lamp on the rest of the room in shadow. "Dear Dr. Hart, thank you again for the life you saved and the life you opened." She wrote about the blackout night, not in the language of a frightened child anymore, but with the perspective of someone who had read the textbooks that described what had happened inside her mother's chest. She wrote about sitting in the ICU corridor, watching nurses move like constellations. She wrote about Harbor Street, the smell of coffee and wet coats, and the click of the bell over the door. "I am going to become a physician," she wrote. "The kind who hears the quiet sound in the room. The kind who notices when someone says, 'It smells funny at home.' The kind who does not walk away when a kid is begging them not to." She signed it. "With all my gratitude, Emma Brooks, MD candidate." He set the letter down beside an old drawing that had hung near the exam room light switch for years. It showed a stick-figure doctor with long arms, a woman on a table, and a small girl holding a heart nearly as big as her head. Above them, in careful crayon, someone had written, "Hope." Outside, the light on the Heart Foundation sign had switched on automatically when the sun went down. The letters glowed softly against the dark. He reached into his wallet. The purple note had faded at the edges, the folds softened from being opened and closed so many times. The words were still legible. He was the only one who heard me. He unfolded it gently, smoothing it flat with his thumb. For a moment he just looked at it, the tilt of the letters, the way the ink had bled. Then he folded it, again smaller this time, and pressed it against his chest with his palm. His hand covered the spot where he had felt 100 different heartbeats, some desperate, some steady, some fading. The room was quiet. If he listened closely, he could hear the soft tick of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of electricity in the wires. Outside, a car rolled past tires, whispering on the pavement. Somewhere in the building, the heater clicked as it cycled. He stood like that for a while, hand over his heart, the thin paper between his skin and the cotton of his shirt. Eventually, he let his hand fall. He turned off the desk lamp. The room dropped into shadow, the only light coming from the hallway and the faint glow through the frosted glass of the front door. He walked down the hall, past the waiting room chairs, past the sign-in sheet and the stack of worn magazines. At the door, he paused and looked back once, listening as if the walls might say something. They did not. He unlocked the deadbolt, opened the door a crack, and stepped outside. The cold night air folded around him, clear and still. The sign above his head shone softly. The Heart Foundation. Listening saves lives. He pulled the door closed until the latch clicked, then checked it with a gentle push. His fingers rested on the handle a second longer than needed. "As long as there is one more heartbeat," he said under his breath, the words barely loud enough for the empty street to catch, "I will keep listening." He slipped his hands into his pockets and walked toward the corner, footsteps quiet on the sidewalk, the sound of his passing joining the low, constant murmur of a city that never entirely slept. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.